get this party started. All right, so question to get us started. Who in the audience has had a conversation with a digital avatar or a digital person before? We've got a few. All right, most, as I expected at a conference like this. I'm going to get us started with just that, a quick understanding, interaction with a digital person, so that we all know what we're talking about and we're all starting out on the same page.
Hi there.
Here comes the volume, guys.
Your guide to soul machines. How are you doing?
Soul Machines is an autonomous animation company that has built the world's first digital brain. It enables human-like face-to-face interactions that are personal, empathetic, and interactive in exactly the same way that our human brain animates us and brings us to life when we interact with each other.
So, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Neil. I'm Director of Product at Soul Machines, and I'm really excited to talk to you guys about how autonomous animation and digital people are revolutionizing the way that brands can interact with their audiences. First, I just want to start by giving you a little bit of context on our mission, and that is to revolutionize human-computer interaction, and specifically human-machine cooperation. Now, why is that? Why is that even an important thing for us to be pursuing? Well, it's because we firmly believe three things. One, that human cooperation is the most powerful force in history. It's allowed us to live healthier lives, to connect with each other in new ways. It's even taken us to the moon. The second thing is that machines have made every aspect of our lives a little bit more impactful, or allowed us to be more impactful as individuals. And the third and final thing is, as a team, humans, machines, and computers can be much more than a sum of their parts, if only we are able to humanize those interactions. So, in order to do that, we have to start with the obvious question, and that is, how do humans cooperate? After spending a lot of time thinking about that, we land on a few obvious answers. Cooperation is having a set of shared goals and having the communication that's required to pursue those goals. Between communication and the shared goals, what we're able to do is we're able to navigate the unavoidable ambiguity and complexity that is in the world that we live in. Because we can frequently give each other feedback, we can share the values that we have as humans and as people, and we can feel like we belong with those that we're working with, we're able to build trust. And with that analog, we are starting to think about digital avatars and digital people in the exact same way. How can we create trust and belonging? Now, as far as communication is concerned, I think we'll all agree after the last 2 years that face-to-face communication is absolutely king. There's so much that you lose in a conversation or in an interaction when you don't have access to so many signals that are delivered from one very, very small and concentrated place. The reason for that is because the face is the mirror to the brain. It's the mirror to what we see, to what we perceive, to what we think, to what we're feeling. And if it's the mirror to our brain, what's reflected is our soul. So much of the way that we communicate lives in how we communicate non-verbally. A conversation on the phone will give you about 30% of what you need to know, but a conversation face-to-face will give you that other 70%. You can express stark agreement with somebody without saying a word. Confusion with just as few words. It allows you to communicate the densest information with the least amount of energy and effort. And so as we think forward to the metaverse, where now these in-person interactions are moving to a more digital medium, we have to naturally think and realize that there needs to be a version of that face-to-face interaction. And that's where digital avatars provide us a really interesting opportunity, both in our day-to-day, but also for brands. The way that apps allowed creators and developers to express themselves in the mobile era, we believe that digital avatars will allow for creators to express themselves in the metaverse era. These avatars will allow us to create belonging and trust and understanding in a way that simply conversation would never be able to. Now, today there are a lot of digital avatars, digital people already in the world. Everything from cartoonish and sort of stylized in nature over to hyper-realistic. Now, what's exciting about this is that there are many things that are common among these different avatars, among these different digital characters. And what I want to talk to you guys about are the four forces, the four innovations that are starting to converge that help us feel as though this technology is going to absolutely change the way that brands interact with their customers, but also internally with their teams. A little bit of sort of crowd participation. We've got a lot of smart people. Any ideas or opinions on what some of those innovations that are converging might be? Don't be shy. AI, yeah, a very reasonable response. What else do we think? Really excited bunch. Data, yep, thank you. Recognition, computer vision, yeah. Coming back to sort of communication. The four that we see, and sort of how we think about developing digital people. First and foremost, how your digital person looks. This has massive implications beyond just having a conversation. It creates inclusion. It shows diversity and allows for you to appeal to the audience that you have. It's also that mirror into what the digital person might be thinking, and therefore what the person behind that digital person might be thinking. Secondly, it's what they say. It's what they know. Whether it's the conversation that's driven by a variety of conversational AI technologies, AI generated to manually scripted, or the way that they're behaving. And this is specifically the autonomous animation element that I was referring to. At the moment, animation is extremely challenging. It takes a lot of energy, takes a lot of time, and it's linear for the most part. But interactions are rarely linear. They don't have one start and one end. They can really go anywhere. And that's why autonomous animation is super critical. And finally, the worlds that they live in. The concept of ubiquity is one that we've, over the last 10 years, as we've entered and started to sort of develop the mobile era, we've realized that meeting customers and meeting your audience where they're at is far more important than anything else. And what our digital avatars will allow you to do is allow you to meet your audience exactly where they're at without having to plan every move. I want to break down each one of these one by one. First, how your digital people look. Now, at the moment, what we're seeing is innovation and sort of a trend towards democratizing really high quality CGI. Every other week, we see a new company or 5 pop up that are developing avatar technology. And this is one of the things that we do at Soul Machines. In fact, here, you'll see our digital DNA blender, a tool that allows for you to truly blend from the overall tone of the skin to the expression, all the way to each of the individual features on your digital person, so you can reflect who you are or who your brand is, but also who your audience is and what they'll respond to. This is especially important when we think about the ethical obligation that we all have towards diversity and inclusion. The next thing is the content, what they know, what they say. And we've seen a trend in how content has evolved over the course of the last 15 to 20 years. It started highly scripted, and on the left-hand side, most of the time you think of things like call center scripts that allow for you to provide a certain experience of quality. As we move to the right, we think about YouTube. Rich media that allows for you to express even more than a conversation ever would. And as we push furthest to the right, we not only have the hardest to scale, but we also have the most effective content. And that's where artificial intelligence, as you said, is going to dramatically change the way that you can create content. The moment that humans don't need to create every ounce of it, the moment they can be supported by generative technologies like NLG, that'll be when we can actually scale the rate at which we can create this content. That'll be the moment that we can start to scale the experiences that we can create and the number of people that we can engage. The third piece, and this is really what we do, is autonomous animation. Now, there are 3 ways to animate a digital person. The first is motion capture, and everyone has seen an example of it, be it from film to games. The second is AI generated. Typically, the most common example is GAN, or deepfake technology. And the third is autonomous animation. Now, as the first clip that I showed you guys said, autonomous animation is what we do as humans. We process signals, we take in information, we understand the meaning of it, and then we plan and sort of effortlessly provide a response. And every single person provides a slightly different response. The reason for that is because at any moment in time, we feel differently. So therefore, we perceive the world differently. And our digital people do the exact same thing with their digital brain. Because they can perceive the world and react to it, they are inherently more empathetic. And empathy is a really important point that I want us to remember. Now, over the last 10 years, we've been trying to solve this problem. And that problem has been, how do we animate digital characters without having to script every single moment of it? This is a really important journey that the industry is on right now, because if digital avatars are ever to be as successful as we believe they can be, every moment of the interaction cannot be scripted. There simply aren't enough people, moments in the day, or servers, honestly, to be able to allow that to happen and make that happen. So what we've done is we've developed a taxonomy, which we call our levels of autonomous animation. On the left-hand side, you see the most scripted. And again, if we think back to the content generation diagram, that's your YouTube content. Those are the conversations you have with call centers. And towards the right, you have what we call the upper levels of autonomous animation, where machines can actually collaborate and cooperate with humans, where we're not simply restricted to what you script, but rather you are now able to generate and support and understand and reason. Right now at Soul Machines, we firmly believe that we are at level 3. Our digital people are not scripted, they react in real time, and all they require is content in order to animate, in order to behave, in order to be supportive to your audiences. Now, as with all frameworks, this is intended to work for us. And for us, it does. But if it doesn't work for you, I really encourage any one of you guys to come up to me towards the end. Let's have a conversation about it. Let's collaborate. Let's figure out how to make it better. Because while every word on this diagram may not stick around, I think the levels will. Now, if I were to have a conversation with each one of you, my instinct, which I think is probably accurate, is that the conversation would go a little bit differently, both from how I behave and feel to how you behave and feel. Obviously, what we say would hopefully be different, otherwise that would be quite boring. Now, our digital people are also able to do the exact same thing. Whether you are selling a product and trying to advise people on what to buy, or supporting a patient, or a digital person's acting as an educational resource for teaching new residents how to deal with an angry or upset parent. The way that that digital person must behave is inherently different. So I'm going to show you a couple of videos on exactly how we do that. The first, who's going to introduce herself, is quite jolly.
Hey there, it's so lovely to see you. I'm Bubbly. It really makes me beam to meet such a delightful and sparkling person like you. You are amazingly cool, so let's be friends. And you can select me, the bubbly behavior style, to bring the wonderful, whimsical, vibrant digital person you've created to life.
So what we just saw there was a digital person that was simply given a script that understands the nature and the context of what it's supposed to be saying, is animating in real time, but is also actually inflecting voice and gesturing at different levels and amplitudes, all just based on a simple script. Now, in this case, the digital person was more jolly. Let's take a look at another example.
Oh, there you are. I'm troubled. My behavior is designed to enhance an emotionally distressed digital person like me. Words like sob, hurt, bleak, cry, and sad will bring out my inherent sensitivity. Bring the responsive, anxious, and stressed digital person you created to life, if you want, by choosing me.
The amount of creative control you have by simply gesturing differently is incredible. And across the board, every one of the customers that we work with and the brands that we work with say, we wish that they were more personalized to how we want them to behave. This is an area that we're spending a lot of time on right now for that very reason. A digital person behaving the exact same way is inherently going to become boring. Every brand will feel the same, and that's not how they are. It's not how they've been developed. So as they lose the ability to be able to, in person, be able to show who they are, we need to be able to provide those brands the ability to do that digitally. And this is how we're doing it. And the final thing is meeting your customer where you're at. Access to those digital worlds is that final and fourth technology. We've all put a VR headset on our heads at some point in time. We've all taken out our cell phone in the middle of a conversation to be able to show someone something. The media and the content that we use is seamless in many, many ways. Where digital avatars appear in your experience need to be the exact same thing. So in order to scale this for enterprise or for massive brands, they need to be able to meet their customers wherever they are and be able to pick up wherever they left off in the previous experience. As we learned in Web 2.0, that seamless experience is here to stay. It's not going anywhere. So, if you are thinking about any use cases like this, please come up to me after the talk. I'd love to learn from you and from your thoughts. On the top there, you see a simple mobile use case. On the bottom, you see something that's quite a bit more immersive, whether it's in a kiosk or in an AR or a VR headset. And then finally, on the right-hand side there, you see an AR experience from a very wobbly-handed engineering lead. You've also taken a trip to New Zealand because I think that's where he filmed that, in his backyard. You guys have learned a little bit about what our digital people can do, but I think seeing is truly believing. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys a couple of videos of real live use cases and roles that our customers are currently putting digital people to help their businesses on. We've seen three things take a lot of traction, really take off. The first one I alluded to was complex selling. Top of funnel, helping people understand what they're trying to buy, what they're trying to engage with. The second is operational efficiency. We simply can't hire enough people to do things around the clock. And this isn't intended to replace, but it's rather intended to supplement the work that humans are already doing. The healthcare industry is a perfect example of this, where there simply aren't enough healthcare workers at the moment to go around. I'll show you an example of that as well. And the final thing is highly emotional moments, where at times, we as people really aren't the best at providing the support that somebody needs, whether it's because we come off as judgy or because we're having something going on in our day. Digital people don't have bad days. Let's talk about the first example, which is with Procter & Gamble.
It's so great to have someone to talk to about beauty stuff. I'm Yumi. What's your name?
I'm Riley.
Hi, Riley. You're looking great today. Which is concerning you?
Pores are definitely bothering me.
It's tempting to be aggressive with pores, but you actually need to be gentle. Wanna know about an SK2 product that'll help?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Cool. Well, here's where you can get your hands on some.
Top of funnel helps you understand what you need in a complex product that you don't really know what to do with the first time you see it. I think 2.3x was the to-cart conversion rate that we were able to lift for them there. The next one's a little bit different. The next one's a little bit softer. Let's take a look at how we help Nestle.
Hey there, I'm Ruth, the Nestle Toll House Cookie Coach. Let's kick things off with the classic Nestle Toll House chocolate chip cookie recipe. I can take you through it step by step, or would you rather work on a new one?
I'd like to customize my cookie.
I really think you're going to like putting your own spin on the classic recipe. To begin, let me know if you've got a dietary preference.
I'd like to do gluten-free, please.
No gluten. Got it. How do you like your cookie?
Thin and crispy?
Time to add morsels. Please pick one.
Semi-sweet.
Classic choice. You chose a winner.
And the last and final was a healthcare use case. A very sensitive conversation that can easily go in the wrong direction. But let's take a look.
Hello.
Hi, I'm Florence from the World Health Organization. I want to talk to you about the harms of using tobacco, including smoking, and how to quit.
Why should I quit smoking?
It's more important than ever to quit during this ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. Smokers are more likely to develop a severe case of COVID-19.
Well, I want to quit, but I've tried before and it's just really hard.
I'm here to help. I can teach you proven techniques to help you quit, tell you why quitting is a good idea, and more. What would you like to talk about?
Well, how do I quit?
Congratulations. Being motivated to quit is the first step. The best way to quit is to build a plan. Are you ready to get started?
Now, the use cases can be imagined, but there are a few core principles that allow for us to have the most impact. Now, obviously, to have that impact, we have to be able to measure it. And so the next slide is to help you guys understand a little bit about how we measure impact and think about the use cases. The first thing we always advise is start with the business outcome that you're trying to drive. And the funny thing is those outcomes aren't drastically changing day over day. The way we accomplish them certainly can, the tools at our disposal, but the outcomes don't really change, whether it's increased revenue or decreased churn. From there, understand the empathy along the journey. Digital people are empathetic. The point that they provide that is different from what when we offer with any other digital media, with any other digital source, is that they can understand who they're having a conversation with. So to have the most impact, target their time on the moments that are most empathetic. From there, define what return even looks like for you. Is it higher conversion? Is it lower churn? Is it higher revenue? And from there, start to execute and iterate on your use case. The first time you implement something, as with everything, it's not going to be perfect. But you will have some signals as to what needs to be improved. And with especially digital people, you'll have access to a lot of information that you don't have access to with any of the other channels that you currently are using. This is an example of empathy. I don't know if it's really visible from the back, but imagine I'm trying to buy a car. The way I start out is by finding vehicles, selecting the one I want, browsing through a few options, then I configure it, I test drive it, and hopefully one day I buy it. The moments where empathy and confidence truly dip are the moments that you should target your attention for a digital person. Those are the times when that support is most needed. Those are the times when confidence is really at its lowest, and a little TLC is going to go a long way. So with that methodology, I hope that you're starting to understand how we think about implementing digital people, how we think about animating them, but most importantly, how we're thinking about cooperation between human and machines. We truly think that it's going to be the next revolution, and especially as we transfer our attention from Web 2 over to Web 3 and into the metaverse. It's a pretty special opportunity for us all to take a look at how digital avatars can help us. That's all I got for you today. Thank you. We got a couple minutes for questions as well.
So with questions, please go one to the floor mics or come over this side. We'll get you a mic. It's important to be mic'd so that we gets recorded for the sessions.
Thanks, Leonard.
Hey, Neil. Thanks so much for the presentation. If I were to think maybe 5 years in the future, right, where I'm wearing one of these, right, and we're talking about photorealistic representations of digital humans, and I'm walking around the street, I run into someone that I know, and they recommend a restaurant, and I go to that restaurant. Is that something that Soul Machines would offer? Is that something that Soul Machines would speak out against, or is it something that Soul Machines would be not interested in talking about?
Just to make sure I understand the question. When you say someone, do you mean a digital person that you're having a conversation with?
I don't know. How would I know? I'd have to take my glasses off.
You would have to, that's fair. So I think that making recommendations on actions is ubiquitous in the world, whether it's a person doing it that is incentivized to do it on behalf of a brand, or it's a digital avatar that's doing it. In terms of whether we are for it or not, recommending a restaurant is pretty harmless. As far as our ethical policy goes, it's not negative or detrimental to someone's life. It's not negative or detrimental necessarily to someone's health in an isolated situation. So from my standpoint, it seems like a pretty reasonable use case to take on. Now, why that recommendation is made is an important factor to consider. So if the recommendation is simply made because it matches interests that have been declared, great. But how we understand the preferences of the individual that's asking, I think, is the piece worth taking a look at, probably.
And then just a quick follow-up. If you think about the technologies that an interaction like that would require, is your product modular enough to be able to protect against anybody using those core technologies for something that maybe isn't as harmless?
At the moment, the way that we approach that is we have a very strong ethical policy in the terms of use. There are several industries at the moment that we've specifically said we don't work with and we will not work with. And as far as the use of our technology, while we don't monitor every single use case yet, because one, we're working with very large enterprises, And two, we have our clause, and the adoption isn't nearly at thousands and millions of scale to where there would need to be a way to monitor it. We can shut down any use case that we need to that doesn't work. But more often than not, we don't even get involved in the first place because it's a big part of how we start business with anyone.
Great, thank you so much.
Thanks, man.
Talk less, smile more. Do you remember that from Hamilton?
I
thought your presentation was beautiful, and you kind of had me until the conversational examples, which I felt like weren't authentic at all, and I just couldn't imagine having those kind of conversations with, and maybe the people were just too well lit or something. But if these were my people, I would put them, I'd like only have them meet people in dark restaurants, or like with a veil on, or something.
What use case do you have in mind here?
I don't know. It seemed like the fiction changed in a radical way once you had a brightly lit person trying to have a really reciprocal conversation. So I wonder if there's a use case that is about more nodding and smiling and being like the recipient of a therapeutic conversation, or some conversation that doesn't involve as much speaking and more just empathizing. Because I felt like when they weren't talking, I was really convinced.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting point. So thank you for that. One of the pieces that we stress quite a bit, and one of my colleagues is going to be speaking a little bit later, might be able to emphasize it even better. So I'm not gonna get too deep into it, is the style and the way that you write conversation. Initially, and I think this is the case with any new technology, we started with long form, and we wanted to get a lot of information across. And it's also how websites started. Now, if you look at any of the largest brands, their websites are quite punchy. There is a premium placed on very focused and very targeted content, and it's much more visual in nature. It's much more engaging. That took about 5 years, 10 years on the website front. What's interesting right now is that it took us about 1.5 years to realize that. More than 10 words, significant drop off in the conversation. So I completely agree that more smiling, less talking, as a principle makes a lot of sense. Picking the use cases where empathy is the most important is another thing that I think that nods to. Times where people want to listen versus times where people don't want to listen, being able to do that. At the end of the day, digital people are a vehicle for accomplishing a goal. And so targeting them at the goal that they are not naturally going to be good at accomplishing is probably going to result in some of the challenges that you're talking about as well. But yeah, I completely agree with that point. I'll take a look at the lighting. Dark rooms and veils. Just in the back or in the front? No, kidding. Yes.
I know. No, this is an interesting area, and I'm seeing a lot of people releasing technology around this. One question I had, having a background in video games that I do, I know that stylistic working and sometimes animating in almost a cartoon way kind of gets you around the uncanny valley and some of the other issues that when you do hyper-realistic you do. So I'm wondering if your customers are asking you for kind of the hyper-realistic as opposed to something a little bit more stylistic or animated, kind of where that push is coming from, because especially your animation and your texturing and everything is very hyper-realistic. So.
Thank you. Great question. I'll answer it in 5 seconds because I'm getting shoot off now as well. Simple answer is yes, we've heard it. We've started to do research on hyper-real versus sort of cinematic stylized in terms of which are most effective. It's super use case or role dependent. Okay. So as far as we're concerned, 2 to 5 year vision for us is the avatar doesn't really matter. Our digital brain should be able to power anything, whether it's our proprietary avatars or something on a Unity or an Unreal Engine or beyond, something in between. Because again, interoperability is I think going to be the focus for the future. So we can talk more about it after. But
Thank you.
Leonard, thanks a lot for the extra time.
Thank you very much, Neil.